Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. 1 week after the riot in Hong Kong, the Special Administrative Region is still trying to come to grips with what happened in the streets of Bangkok. The riot dealt a blow to the city's reputation for law and order and presented a grave challenge to the authority of the government and police. It also rubbed salt in the wound of an already declining tourism industry and tarnished the name of Hong Kong. What were the root causes behind these latest protests? Are young people frustrated by the city's faltering economy and brainwashed by anti-mainland ideas? And what does it mean for the next step in the rule of law? Today, we are joined in the studio by Anna Tang, an author and columnist, and Professor Shan Bin from Tsinghua University. We shall also talk to Edward Xie, founder and CEO at Gaofeng Advisory Company via satellite in Hong Kong. But before we get started, let's take a look at this background story.
The violence erupted during Lunar New Year celebrations on the night of February the 8th. When authorities tried to remove illegal street vendors, several hundred people joined the confrontation and turned it into violence. They barricaded the street, set fires going, damaged police cars and pelted police officers with bricks. 89 police officers and several journalists were injured. The police say they were forced to fire warning shots and use pepper spray to rescue personnel. Hong Kong SAR Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying condemned the rioters' violent behaviour and expressed his support for the police for their efforts in restoring order and peace.
Of the people who have been arrested by police so far, the jobless constituted the majority, instead of middle school or university students, and a large number of them belong to racial political groups.
These latest riots that have occurred since the Occupy Central movement have severely challenged the status quo. Civil groups in Hong Kong took to the streets to condemn the violence on Sunday. More than 200 demonstrators gathered at the landmark clock tower in southern Kowloon, holding up banners and signboards, shouting slogans in support of the police.
All Hong Kong residents should do some soul-searching after this incident, because it takes two to tango. As we all can see, the government has to figure out ways to deal with the anger in our young people. After the arrests of rioters, we have to press on and make clear what they want and what motivated them to participate in such a riot.
Frankly, any recurrence of violent incidents or riots like this will have a disastrous effect and keep tourists away for a long time to come.
According to Hong Kong media, the number of mainland tourist groups to Hong Kong dropped 70% during this spring festival, the greatest fall in more than a decade. Trade, finance and the retail industry are also suffering.
Welcome to Dialogue. Let me open the discussion with Dr. Edward Xie, who's standing by in Hong Kong with this. Well, of course, you guys in Hong Kong had an eventful Spring Festival, which is the most important festival for the Chinese, and Hong Kong is no exception, I believe. What's the latest? Did you have a happy festival, Edward?
Yeah, in general, aligned with our Chinese traditions, we had a very good Chinese New Year holiday here. But of course, the riot in Bangkok on the evening of the first day of the New Year had really, in a way, destroyed much of that otherwise very nice feelings.
What's the latest about the media response, and are people still recovering from the petitions from the student unions from 7 universities in Hong Kong?
Well, I think there's been a lot of different sort of responses from different corners of the Hong Kong society. Clearly, the government has spoken out. Clearly, the police also has spoken out. The general public have also spoken out. And of course, the student unions that represents the University of Hong Kong have also spoken out. There's a range of different sort of perspectives and positions that people have taken. But in general, I think all of the Hong Kong people have been really struck by this major riot in Bangkok on the first day of the New Year.
Edward, what's happened to those protesters who were held under detention?
Well, some of them has been released on bail. And as you know, it's going to take some time to arrange for the trials. But when some of these people, when they came out on bail, they're trying to talk about the fact that they were not involved in the riots. They were just watching. or they said, well, it's the police who have been taking the upper hand instead of themselves, and a lot of different sort of excuses or different reasons. But in general, as you know, the police have made quite a number of arrests, which is actually quite responsive.
A lot of those who follow the process in Hong Kong here in the mainland are wondering if local legislature in Hong Kong would come under pressure to amend your constitution, to amend the laws in Hong Kong, and allow police to defend themselves with firearms under extreme circumstances. Edward.
Yeah, I think in general, the Hong Kong's public reaction to how the police have handled this riot was that the Hong Kong police has probably been on the gentle side. And partly, as my own observation, is that perhaps they were not quite prepared because the whole incident happened pretty abruptly. But nonetheless, I think some of the legislators have come out to say, well, perhaps the police has to be a little bit more strong. They should be given more opportunity and right to defend themselves in the case when their lives were threatened by the rioters.
Thank you very much, Edward. Anna, what would be the situation in the United States when cops were confronted by angry protesters and they pelted the police with bricks, and some of the policemen in Hong Kong were seriously wounded, it seems?
Yeah, I think the fact that there are 90 police officers who were injured during this it speaks to the level of violence that was going on. So these excuses that I was just standing there and somebody just grabbed me, or that they were jumping all over us, is a little bit thin. I was a former prosecutor. I've heard these kinds of excuses before. In terms of what happened in the U.S., I would like to believe that in the U.S. you would have the same level of restraint, but I doubt it. In these kinds of confrontations, the tear gas goes up, they have the riot police, the shields, the batons, their charges. You often see, videotape of, demonstrators, even when they're down, being brutally beaten.
Professor Shan, being given the aftershocks of the campaign in the United States, Black Lives Matter as well, what do you think would be the most likely response from the cops, the law enforcement personnel in the United States in a similar situation when protesters used, stones and bricks to pelt the law enforcement personnel?
I would think this kind of situation would be, I think, between the police and the young people would be different. Different situation in Hong Kong case, because in Hong Kong case, I think this is the first time ever the police has ever encountered such a kind of situation. So they are not like the U.S. Police. They have so experienced and they have so many historical record. So they could have a very well-wrought law and kind of regulation to protect their rights. So I would think this incident would actually urge Hong Kong police and also Hong Kong legislators revise their current situation.
Well, I think I look at it a little bit differently. I don't look at the actions and reactions. What I'm concentrate on is the rule of law. I mean, the whole point of everything that's been going on, and at least by many of the demonstrators, is that they want this, quote, rule of law, that they see this as sacrosanct. But what you have here is a bunch of hooligans taking advantage of a situation where they were simply trying to clear some street vendors who were illegally selling these foods. Traditional as it may be, were illegally selling them, and they were moved on. And this became a flashpoint for these mobs of unruly people. And it's a shame that the students have come out in favor of that. I understand that they're angry, but in today's world, everyone's angry. The question is,
Donald Trump was taking advantage of the anger.
Well, not only Donald Trump, but everyone else.
In France is taking advantage of the anger.
But this anger is not solving anything. When we have an Arab Spring, yes, it was fueled by anger. A lot of it righteous anger, but that anger does not create a government. It does not create a rule of law. It creates mob justice and violence, and that's what you had here.
But the irony lies precisely is that among all the Greater China region, Hong Kong used to be the model of the rule of the law.
But this is my whole point. Yeah. Yes, this model rule of law has turned into mob violence being perpetuated.
But
by
Edward, do you think
Riot.
this old image of being a good example for law and order in Hong Kong would be now on the verge of a bankruptcy? It's about to collapse. I mean, the mainland tourists in particular would have an unpleasant feeling about whether they would be safe when doing shopping there. They are unwelcome there. Don't you think there's a sharp decline in tourism industry, and that'll be a severe blow to your local business?
Well, certainly incidents like this would have some negative impact on some of the industries, in particular the travel and tourism industry. That's for sure. But I believe that all this sort of impact is going to be quite transient. The real impact for Hong Kong is what's going to be Hong Kong in the future. What are we going to be? Are we going to be continue to be divided between the people who believe in one side and people who believe in the other side, and there's no reconciliation between the two? Or are we going to find a ways that we can work together, unite on a united front, that we can sort of move Hong Kong and promote Hong Kong to be a even better place? I think this requires a lot of reflection from a lot of people on discussing what are we going to be in the future.
Edward here came up with a very serious issue about the future of Hong Kong. Now, I'm also wondering aloud, gentlemen, whether people will be divided at the two ends of the spectrum, with one side representing the underrepresented people, the young unemployed, particularly those poor, unfortunate university graduates. They are found jobless the moment they graduate. And on the other side, those small groups of super rich guys benefiting enormously from preferential policies since the return in 1997.
Young Ray, I really think that's an oversimplification. I mean, it's not like there's just a bunch of rich guys and things. Yes, there is a huge Gini index coefficient difference between them. But Hong Kong has always been a mercantile society where they, being lionized is riding around in your Rolls, going to these top clubs. Everyone aspires to this. So I don't
but
think
Hong Kong
it's
seems
unfair.
to be like a paradise for the young people, but where is the silent majority? I mean, the silent middle class. Hong Kong is
They're
supposed to be
squeezed.
a showcase for the maturity of a middle class in an olive-shaped society where rule of law would prevail.
Yes, but the problem with middle-class societies is they're less willing to change. I mean, when you talk about migrants in China, they go where the work is. When you start talking about younger kids from Hong Kong, they will not. There are plenty of jobs and opportunities, especially for these very, very well-educated, in most instances English-speaking, for jobs within Greater China, but they don't necessarily go there. And this is part of the middle-class disease, this unwillingness to shift.
I believe what happened in the Occupy Central movement, as well as riots in Mongkok, would be a wake-up call for the local authorities in Hong Kong. Now, I believe Mr. Liang Chenying, the Chief Executive Officer of the Hong Kong SAR government, is licking the wound and is recovering from the shocks. And what would happen in the aftermath of these unrest in Hong Kong? Edward, do you think more job opportunities will be created with the help and powerful assistance from the mainland, so that, for example, there will be more chance for the upward mobility? That's the very major concern. We'll talk about the future of the young people in Hong Kong, right? Edward?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. And I believe that the crux of the whole issue is this one, the one that you just mentioned, which is the lack of upward mobility for the Hong Kong young people. And frankly, this issue is not, it did not just happen just because C.Y. Leung was the chief executive. It has been planted for a number of years, and no one have really truly tried to address the issue. And now it became an issue. But at the same time, I believe that we do have solutions. The solutions, in my view, is that we're going to channel the energy of the young people to opportunities where previously perhaps they are not able to reach to, but we create opportunities so that they can reach to these new opportunities through, in my view, entrepreneurship and innovation, and in particular embracing the China market as a market for all of us in Hong Kong. That's the way forward.
Few people for the rest of the world would ever question the lack of entrepreneurship for the place of Hong Kong. But you are watching Dialogue with Professor Shan Bin from Tsinghua University and Mr. Anna Tangen, as well as Edward Xie. We are discussing the broad implications of the latest riots in Mongkok, Hong Kong. what the message has been delivered through this eventful Spring Festival in Hong Kong. We'll be back in a short while. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Let's look at the future of Hong Kong. Now, of course, future lies with the younger generation, and the next immediate question would be job opportunities. To have a good job opportunity, it means they have to enjoy more latitude, for example, free movement of the human resources across the border between Hong Kong and mainland. Now, the next question, I'm afraid, is Putonghua. I mean, are those guys able to speak a very good Putonghua, the Mandarin, so that they can be given a good job in mainland, which is, of course, more prosperous and therefore stands a good chance for giving them good opportunities. What do you think of this option on the table?
I think the learning Mandarin Chinese or Putonghua is actually not just providing a chance for the job career, but also it's kind of cultural identity. If you look at Cantonese young people in Guangzhou and other cities in Guangdong, they actually have a very active role in learning Mandarin Chinese to try to be integrated into this greater Chinese culture. So this is something the Hong Kong young generation should actually be inspired, not only just to learn the Mandarin to get the job career, but also to integrate it into the greater China community.
But given the radical nature of the unrest and the petitions, as well as protests in Mongkok, as well as what happened in the Occupy Central movement with the end of 2014, Anna, those cynical young people refuse to take mainland as part of their territory. They call for establishing an independent Hong Kong country. I mean, this is a shock. I mean,
well, it's also won't solve it. An independent Hong Kong is not going to be. It will not have any benefits. It will lose the ties to China. Where's it going to get business? The jobs will not be being moved from the mainland to Hong Kong. You have two choices. You either embrace the spirit of innovation and figure out something that you can do in Hong Kong that has value somewhere. Doesn't matter if it's China or some other market, or you go to a market where your skills are saleable. Now, the fact is Hong Kong has a terrific education system. Most of these kids have had free education through most of their lives.
Excuse me, I'm afraid you'll be put under scrutiny by those who are very skeptical about the education in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong used to enjoy elite education. Is no longer the case with the enlargement of the enrollment programs for so many universities and colleges in Hong Kong. It means the moment they graduate, they would not stand any chance of finding a good job. I mean, also they face very good, tough competitions from brilliant students from mainland. Therefore, the chance for them
competition is good, and if you can measure up,
it's not good for the locals.
Well, if you can't measure up locally, or you're going to measure up internationally, this is the issue. China has to do the same thing.
Don't forget,
the students
in Hong Kong,
here in China
have industries. One is the real estate development, and the other financial industry.
And
these two industries only require the brilliant,
that's
brilliant.
That's very tough. But the whole point is when you're facing a situation like that, you have to find a different road. And this is the issue. You cannot be a spoiled middle-class kid and just say, I want the job to come to me. Somebody owes me a job. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in China. It doesn't happen in the U.S. anymore. And it's starting to stop happening in Europe.
Not only descendants of the local Hong Kong citizens, but their fathers, parents, their grandparents have been proud of being treated as second-class citizens of the British colony. Sorry for saying this. Some of those guys in Hong Kong, like Edward here, may not agree with me. But Edward, what do you think of this radical assumption that some of those guys in Hong Kong would be proud of being treated like British citizens? Because the moment they heard that Hong Kong would return to the mainland, many of them applied for the rights of abode, right? They still enjoy the privilege of being treated as British citizen, right?
Yeah, there are some of those people in Hong Kong, and that's understandable because, as you know, Hong Kong has been ruled by the Brits for a long period of time. Some people believe that the British system is a superior system, for right or for wrong, than the Chinese system. But I think, it's also time for some of the Hong Kong people to move on. In my view, it doesn't really require the whole spectrum of the Hong Kong young people, and in fact the Hong Kong people, to move along in the right direction before we see some real changes. All we need is actually a handful of the leading Hong Kong young people who actually embrace this mindset and the concept that, hey, there's opportunities. There's opportunities either here, or opportunity in China, or opportunity for the world. And we can do it. We, from Hong Kong, are as good as the young people as any other parts of the world. And why not? Why not give it a try? I think right now, this awareness is not quite heightened yet within Hong Kong. It requires people to heighten their awareness and to lead the Hong Kong young people. A small bunch of it will begin to become the pioneers to demonstrate to the rest of the Hong Kong young people that, in fact, there's a way. There's a third way that is out there that's available for the very best Hong Kong young people to grab the opportunity and become very, very successful. And then hopefully the rest can see. But we're not there yet, but I think there's a way. It requires the leadership and also the support from a lot of stakeholders in Hong Kong to make it happen, instead of dwelling, from my standpoint, dwelling on some of the not so important issues.
Now, Edward, Mr. Liang Zhenying, the SAR government chief executive officer, allegedly does not enjoy popularity with many in Hong Kong. He's not very popular, to be honest, according to the media reports. And the mainland has so far remained pretty silent and quiet. However, the recent riot, Mr. Edward Xie, has sparked another round of debates over revisiting a basic law article on national security. For example, Article 23 of Hong Kong's Basic Law, which stipulates that Hong Kong shall enact laws on its own to prohibit any act of treason, secession, sedition, subversion against the Central People's Government, has gained wide attention. Is the legislation process of Article 23 likely to be accelerated by the Mong Kok riot? Edward?
As you know, Article 23 is part of the Basic Law. And it's actually the responsibility of the Hong Kong legislators to really legislate that. The fact that it has not been legislated since the handover in 1997, in my view, by itself is an issue. But at the same time, because of the complexity of Hong Kong, in particular given the mood of a range of Hong Kong people, the fact that it has not been legislated so far is also understood. In my view, it is critical at some point that Hong Kong need to legislate this Article 23. But to what extent this should be related or correlated with the Mong Kok riot, in my view, they're somewhat, obviously they're related, but the correlation is actually not as strong. I think the Mong Kok riot is an issue with an extreme group of young people who are extremely dissatisfied and frankly not quite appropriate. At the same time, the process towards legislating Article 23 should be ongoing anyways. At some point, this has to be legislated.
Professor Shi, do you think basically we have two different approaches, if not two entirely different approaches? One is how to soft pedal the issue. The other is to adopt a high-handed crackdown upon those who violate the law, citing Article 23, for example. What do you think should be done to show the growing dissent, anger from the mainland? I believe most of the silent majority here in mainland would say, enough is enough. Now, if you guys don't think it's the preferential policies, the one country, two systems would be more suitable any longer, then we'll take you back, okay? You could be part of Shenzhen, right? And that's, of course, a very radical way of expressing the discontent from the mainland. What do you think?
I still think that as a professor of communication, I would highlight the importance of communication, even Article 23. This issue was actually accumulated since 2007. I think during the past decade, this Article 23 has not been actually reached a kind of consensus among Hong Kong people, especially how to understand all these the legal statement. So I would think, again, this kind of communication by intellectuals, by politicians.
I'm going to say that as a lawyer, I can tell you it is absolutely clear what it says. You cannot have a situation where Hong Kong is trying to go independent, and that's clearly what it said.
Legal incident actually did not actually reach kind of. I think it's clearly
No,
stated
you had
that
you had
cannot-
you had people in the street yelling independent Hong Kong and things like that. No,
That is too
that's one
much.
thing. On the other hand, do you want to take a heavy hammer to what is in essence attack? I mean, these are unorganized, in some cases thugs, who are going about trying to express their anger. Beating on them, and in the same process beating on the whole of the Hong Kong people, is not useful. But in the end, Hong Kong needs to settle themselves. The mainland expressing anger isn't going to move the Hong Kong people. The Hong Kong people have to decide their direction, and they only have one direction to go.
Few in the mainland would believe that the referendum is likely to be held in Hong Kong to decide their future, like what happened in Scotland last year, which was a near thing. Of course, Prime Minister David Cameron was
that was legally
life. I mean,
that was legally promulgated. That was actually offered. This is not something that's being offered by the mainland.
No, the Scottish people was persuaded by Prime Minister. So this the power of communication.
Well, many outside China are wondering why parallels should not be drawn between Macau and Hong Kong. Because 2 years after the handover of Hong Kong, Macau came back from the Portuguese colonial rule. And so far, everything has been peaceful, and locals in Macau enjoy very much their life, if not the casino industry. So the dividends of the casino
But it's
industry.
different cultures, different numbers of people. And, I don't think it's apples and oranges. And they got casinos.
It's also the Hong Kong
Why casinos would
cultural
make them
identity.
happy?
would be an issue.
Well, it provided a lot of employment, but not everybody in Macau is happy. I mean, a lot of people have a kind of distant
young
eye
people.
towards the time when life was a little bit easier, not as expensive. A lot of the locals are being priced out of their own homes because of the cost of real estate.
The power of British culture definitely is prevail Portuguese culture. So this is also
Portuguese
cultural
cultures
thing.
never treated the locals as second-class citizens. They were
Very quickly,
simply
what do you
them.
think of anger of young people in Taiwan? People, observers from Europe, for example, are likely
Identity
to draw a
crisis.
parallel between Hong Kong and Taiwan.
I would think there's still a separate issue, but I think really Hong Kong young people had a lot of inspiration from what happened in Taiwan. So again, I would think the communication between mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong would be very important. I hope the consensus can be reached in the young
I
generation.
think it's an identity crisis that's shared by both of them. These are Chinese places and people, and they're having a hard time coming to grips with the sense that they are Chinese.
Perhaps the former leader of Taiwan, Mr. Chen Shui-bian, takes much of the blame for getting rid of the Chinese influence from the local curriculum for the primary education in Taiwan. With that, we come to the end of this additional dialogue with Dr. Shan Bin and Anna Townsend, of course, editors here from Hong Kong. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.